Now, let's hear from two leaders working each day for clean energy, a strong democracy, and a livable climate: Dionne Delli-Gatti and William Barber III. Earlier this year, Governor Cooper hired Dionne Delli-Gatti to be North Carolina's Clean Energy Director. In this policymaking capacity, she focuses on efforts to promote clean energy in North Carolina, including negotiating energy legislation, advancing regulatory efforts, and implementing Executive Order 80 and the state's Clean Energy Plan. An Air Force veteran, Delgatti was previously the Environmental Defense Fund's Director of Southeast Climate and Energy. That followed 6 years at the Atlanta EPA Regional Office as Congressional and Governmental Liaison, and previous service at the Ohio EPA and the City of Dallas. A graduate of North Carolina Central University and the University of North Carolina School of Law, William J. Barber III is the Strategic Partnership Manager of the Climate Reality Project's Climate Justice Initiative. He is the co chair of the North Carolina Poor People's Campaign Ecological Justice Committee and serves on the North Carolina Department of Environmental Quality Secretary's Environmental Justice and Equity Board. We are delighted to have them with us tonight to discuss environmental justice and our clean energy future. And good evening to you both.
Good evening.
The governor recently signed a bill which codifies his clean energy plan to get us to carbon neutrality by 2050. This is great progress, but NCLCV and other environmental and energy organizations are concerned the bill allows Duke Energy to profit on the backs of low-income North Carolinians and allows them too much wiggle room to get out of a clean energy transition. What more can we do to hold Duke's feet to the fire, force a more rapid adoption of wind and solar, and prevent more natural gas build-out and protects ratepayers?
Certainly. Would you like me to go first, or William, would you like to jump in? All right. So as you mentioned before in your intro, I think it is essential and dire that we act on climate, and the governor believed that firmly. And that is part of why we work to negotiate the climate bill that you're talking about, the Climate and Clean Energy Bill. The dialogue related to affordability and this bill has been essential. It's been very important. We fought very hard to get stronger affordability components and programs attached to this bill. But at the end of the day, there were philosophical differences among the legislators who were working on the bill. And we were forced to compromise on something that we know is not sufficient to tackle the affordability issue. However, we did feel that there were multiple different levers that we could work on that and intend to work on that, but we felt that this was an essential and key place where we could tackle climate change in a way that we could not in another time or another space. So we worked hard with many of the legislators that this organization supports on a regular basis, and came to what we ended up with in the bill, and that was codifying the state's clean energy goals, requiring the Utility Commission to ensure that Duke gets to 70% reduction by 2030 and net zero by 2050. And so this gives the Utility Commission new tools and a North Star for achieving these goals that they haven't had before. And I think that will be essential. Again, we were unable to get as much as we wanted on some of the other issues, but we know we have other avenues and we have to keep working on those things.
Thank you so much. Mr. Barber.
Thank you. Yeah, to chime in on that, as was said, the bill, there are some things to be considered and commended in the bill. The bill calls, as Dionne mentioned, for reducing greenhouse gas emissions 70% by 2030. That's important. In the midst of a climate and environmental crisis, that's important. We talk about the deployment of renewable energy resources, and protections for smaller solar producers. Those are important and critical pieces. However, the affordability piece has to be central in our understanding and our measure of success when we're looking at climate action. The Utilities Commission estimated that Duke Energy customers could see rates go up by 4.5% by the end of this decade under this current bill. So when we say that there is work to do, that is not to be taken lightly. And there's no estimate yet on the impact that that could have on electricity rates. Understand, we're living in a state where already there are 1.4 million North Carolinians living at or below the federal poverty level who struggle to pay their energy bills, for whom are very familiar with the reality of energy burden. This dynamic that some say the heat or eat dilemma, where families literally have to understand or have to weigh whether they heat their homes, maintain their homes, or feed their families. Racial disparities exacerbate this energy poverty. We know that energy burdened households are more likely to earn less than $20,000 annually and be of African American or Latino descent. The great travesty of this is that overwhelmingly, these are the same communities that make up the communities that are on the front lines of the very climate crisis we claim to be trying to solve. So while there are things in the bill that advance the conversation for climate solution and move us in the right direction, we must fight. And there was a mention in the video, accountability and a responsibility. Each of us, if we claim to be serious about addressing this crisis, if we claim to be serious about advancing and promoting climate and environmental justice, we must understand that when historically marginalized people are unable to participate, even in small benefits from our clean energy solutions, when access to good job opportunities narrow, when energy burden for communities is increased, when we look at our metrics just based on lowering of emissions and energy generation and not how do we get real dollars and relief to families on the ground, we miss the point. We miss the point. So we have to really advocate on the behalf of frontline communities as policies continue to roll out.
North Carolina is also beginning the process of rulemaking to join the Regional Greenhouse Gas Initiative with Virginia, Pennsylvania, and states to the Northeast. NCLCV has been supportive of this effort, with the caveat that low-income North Carolinians and communities of color must not face any more of a threat from pollution and economic loss than they already do. How do we prioritize environmental justice communities in planning our clean energy future so they have an equitable seat at the policymaking table and also benefit equitably from the transition of terms of clean energy jobs, accessing clean energy itself, and the siting of energy projects?
There are
No, go ahead, William.
Well, thank you, Dionne. There are two concerns really that come to mind when we talk about prioritizing EJ communities in this conversation. The first is hotspotting. Any implementation of RGGI can and must avoid hotspotting, where we see energy producers shift energy generation to cheaper polluting sources that are in frontline communities, even while they may decrease emissions statewide. We cannot have that reality happen in the state if we're talking about equity, if we're talking about environmental justice. Additionally, we have to avoid any imposing of emissions reduction costs onto ratepayers who are already in the middle of a pandemic, already, in many cases, struggling to pay their utility bills. There are ways that we can do this. New Jersey, for example, has a strategic funding plan that mandates that revenue from RGGI goes towards transportation solutions and emission reductions that prioritize environmental justice areas and those communities that have demonstrated the greatest need. Virginia law, which has joined recently, mandates that 50% of RGGI revenues go to programs that improve energy efficiency, thereby lowering bills for low-income households, for those frontline communities. Pennsylvania has codified a set of equity goals as mandatory rules for participation that include inclusively gathering and considering input from the public, especially environmental justice communities, protecting public health and welfare, seeking to ensure environmental and structural racism are not replicated in the engagement process, and working intentionally to equitably distribute environmental and economic benefits of the proceeds of allowance auctions. A major component of prioritizing environmental justice communities in policies like RGGI and any other clean energy solution is not just the engagement, but actually looking at clear carve-outs, set-asides, percent investments of any funds that are generated that are going to these communities. When we think about the flow of resources that are going to be coming through the state from now until 2030 in terms of energy generation, battery storage, clean and electric vehicle, if we cannot at the end of this period look back and see exactly what percentage of resources were designated for frontline environmental justice communities, we have missed the window. Equity is not just about engagement. It's not just about having a seat at a table. Equity is not just a destination. It is a process. And we must find clear, mandated ways in our policy to hold our state leadership accountable to a process that invests real dollars, real opportunities, real channels of ownership in the communities that have traditionally been burdened the most by our dependence on the fossil fuel infrastructure.
Ms. Delli-Gatti.
Yes. So as you mentioned, there's been a petition filed for RGGI here in the state. I think we need multiple layers of solutions to tackle these challenging issues, whether it be the affordability issue or our reducing our emissions to address our climate challenges. And so, the petition is moving through the process right now. There's a lot of states who've seen a lot of positive benefits and have implemented RGGI well, like William has just mentioned. However, every state is different. And there is a fair amount of opposition to RGGI from, some of which has been from the environmental justice leaders. Right now, where that is it's going through the evaluation, modeling, and a fiscal note to actually take a look at some of these financial impacts, the fiscal impacts that we can expect from layering this into the set of solutions that we're looking at for tackling our climate problems in the state. So I think it's yet to be seen how this will look, but I couldn't agree more. It is essential that we have all the voices at the table, frontline communities, especially. And I think no matter what suite of solutions that we look towards, we need to have complementary programs that drive jobs in the clean tech industry and renewable industries. The governor has established some partnership programs. Halifax Community College has a apprenticeship program in the solar space. Roanoke Electricity is going to be hiring some of those interns. We need to expand upon programs like that to ensure that there are ongoing opportunities for our workforce. We have also, the governor's staff and commerce have developed the wind supply chain study that takes a look at the manufacturing opportunities and the jobs that can be associated with us trying to achieve the goals that were set forth in the bill that we've had here in the state for a long time, and whether or not we're able to attach that to RGGI and have those funds. There's a dedicated pot of money with any state that joins RGGI that goes to community benefit. And so what that would look like in North Carolina is not clear yet, because our implementation here would potentially be a little bit different than what we see in other places. It would be a consignment auction. And so we really need to ensure that under that paradigm, we would have the ability to direct these funds in the ways that we see fit and see important to provide benefit to those most in need.
Governor Cooper is joining forces with President Biden's administration Virginia Governor Ralph Northam, and Maryland Governor Larry Hogan to accelerate offshore wind projects in the Southeast and to make our state a leader in the wind energy manufacturing supply chain. Unfortunately, some of the same local governments and trade groups that helped us stop the previous president's offshore drilling campaign are now using the same concerns about our coastal tourism and fishing industries to oppose offshore wind. How can we change their minds and bring them in as partners rather than opponents?
So I think, what we see is that, everyone is seeking the opportunity to have safe, reliable, and affordable power. And what that really means is they want power that does no harm economically to individuals and no harm economically to communities. And I think there are fears that there will be impacts to the economic drivers along the coast, tourism and things of that nature. From the stakeholder groups that I've been in and participated in associated with the offshore wind leases, that is the big concern that most of these communities have, and they'd like to see them moved a little bit further out. But what the reality that we've seen further up the coast is that there haven't been negative impacts on tourism where there's offshore windmills. In fact, in some cases, they've seen increases. So I think continuing the dialogue and education to reduce fears, always respectful conversation, and really listening to what these fears are based on and trying to identify solutions is important. And, again, the cost of no action is huge as well, and especially to these very same communities. They're the ones that have been the most impacted by climate change here in the state. They've faced the burden of multiple hurricanes over the past several years, and the flooding and the rebuilding and the power outages that are associated with that. So if we can find solutions that drive clean energy and can actually help support tourism, as well as bringing new jobs to the manufacturing supply chain in that area, that's a huge benefit on multiple layers to multiple communities.
Mr. Barber?
I very much agree with Dionne on this issue. It's that, conversation and continued education is a crucial piece of kind of climbing this curve collectively. Those fears, those concerns are warranted. But as was mentioned, there have been studies that have shown that there are multiple co-benefits, of coastal wind. There was a study published by the University of Rhode Island that looked at tourism on Block Island, where turbines were easily within view of the island. And it showed that tourism actually increased the year after the wind farm was built. In fact, there was an 19% increase in occupancy rates for tourist residential homes upon completion of the wind farm. There was a different study published in 2020 by the University of Delaware that showed that not only would beach goers be indifferent to offshore wind farms, but they would be interested enough to visit them. There are also additional co-benefits to marine life, to the fishing industry that have been seen. In Block Island, the wind farm there has already seen a boom to recreational fishing because there is a new habitat for the base of food that attracts larger fish sought by locals and vacationers. What we know is that what clearly increases with offshore wind development is the opportunity, as was already alluded, for new economies in these coastal regions to grow beyond the traditional confinements of a seasonal or industry-heavy hospitality industry. These projects bring new employment to the area. They offer coastal residents the chance to find new careers. They also undergird, the area with a level of reliable, sustainable energy. And in the aggregate, wind is one of the most powerful weapons in our arsenal to address the impacts of a climate crisis, to address and rapidly lower carbon emissions. So again, conversation and education on this issue, I think, is key to continuing our forward momentum and becoming a leader in the state.
Finally, Congress is in what we hope are the final stages of passing the biggest climate bill in our country's history, the Build Back Better Act, along with bipartisan infrastructure bill. In the coming years, North Carolina may be getting a lot of funding to implement these bills, climate and environmental provisions. What are your thoughts on how our state can best use these funds to create good jobs and to stem climate impacts and environmental justice? And how can we make sure the General Assembly doesn't usurp any authority Congress gives the governor to spend these funds?
William, you want to take the lead on this one? Feels right in your sweet spot.
Yeah. So, initially, again, I'll go and speak back to what I alluded to at the beginning. When we talk about policy, one of the most effective ways I think we can use these funds are clear carve-outs for investments for environmental justice communities. Not only engagement plans, not only plans for outreach, but clearly established mandates that articulate the numbers we want to reach in both impact and access. When we look at the Build Back Better program, one of the most powerful aspects is the 40% carve out of all clean energy and climate investments mandated to go to frontline BIPOC environmental justice communities. North Carolina could do the same thing. North Carolina could do the same thing, and we must do the same thing if we're serious about addressing equity, promoting environmental justice, and building and protecting, building a clean economy that protects frontline communities and all North Carolinians. When we look again at the number of dollars that pass through the state from now till 2030, we need to be able to clearly point to where there were clear, established, mandated investments for energy generation, energy storage, clean transit that went directly to the communities that needed the most. And when we talk about environmental justice communities, recognize that the opportunity is not just for workforce development, but is also for community ownership in a number of these projects. And community ownership has been shown to have incredible benefits for local communities in terms of undergirding those areas with economic foundations, but also allowing these areas to more efficiently retain their greatest minds, their young populations, and to become thriving epicenters of progress. We must do that in the state, and we can.
The last word.
No, I agree so much with what William just said there. I think, us investing both in infrastructure as well as programs that support a just transition is essential. And everything from the individual investments in homes, energy efficiency, weatherization, things of that nature, to broad scale system infrastructure, transmission and distribution, ensuring that we can get the electrons from the coast to the population centers so that they can, that we can use the potential of offshore wind to actually meaningfully support our needs in the state, but also, again, building on these programs that provide job training. And like William said, we need ownership. We need community solar programs. We need innovatively designed programs that seek to solve multiple solutions, like many of the things that Roanoke Electric is doing. They've done investments in demand side management, and then that has then in turn been reinvested into solar programs, and they're now looking at the benefits of vehicle to grid, battery electric integration, and all sorts of things. And I think wisely investing this, I do think it's important to focus on frontline communities. Again, expanding the job training programs, investing where we know that there's opportunities for the supply chain for offshore wind, and continuing to expand our clean energy jobs in the solar industry here in the state. And we are hearing rumors that the proposed CEPP is likely to change. And it may be more incentivized and things of that nature. But I think one of the good things that we are hearing is that those incentives, states like ours who have clear climate goals, will benefit largely from those things. But we need to build upon what we've already started with the CARES Act funding. And the Cooper administration already started with energy efficiency and weatherization investment with those funds. So I think it's important that we do a real analysis to see where we need to complement, where we have gaps and need further investment, so that we ensure that we utilize these dollars to the greatest benefit to help the most people.
Dionne Delli-Gatti, William J. Barber III, thank you both so very much. You've given us a lot to think about. Thank you.